This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
You are tuned in to the FowlWeather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
How do ducks move on moon phases? Do bluebills migrate on a blue moon? Does shooting ducks at 55 yards high work for you, the ducks, and your fellow hunter? We applaud your highball, but please do shove your call, maybe into a very dark place. Praise that dog. Don't claim that banded duck too soon. How your 3.5-inch shell is full of bull, and your duck migration forecast, all this week on the FowlWeather Podcast. Hey, thanks everyone for listening, and remember to share, like, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd really appreciate it if you'd take a second to rate us on Spotify and Apple, as well as share the FowlWeather Podcast with friends. Remember that you know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. We are really thankful for our every week listeners. You know who you are. Those that never miss a single migration forecast each Monday morning. Y'all are as ate up as me about ducks, duck biology, and duck migration. Our dedicated weekly listeners can pick the best days to hunt because the FowlWeather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. And remember that we are the only science-based duck migration forecast available, brought to you by hunters for hunters. I'm your host, Dr. Mike, coming to you from the home office in Jack's Reef. It's been a great week getting back on pace at the farm after returning from our trip to North Dakota. We released an exciting and fun episode of the Kitchen Conversations last week, which included some waterfall trivia, so have a listen and see how you do. And at least Sarah did not get fired from Ducks Unlimited during trivia. You'll have to listen to know what that's about. We've been chasing big bucks at the farm with no luck so far, but Sarah, Yeager, and I got in one last duck hunt this morning before our first split ended. Stale ducks all around, but we managed 6 birds, 3 mallards, 2 pintails, and a green-winged teal. Some good shooting, some bad shooting, but a lot of birds that just didn't want to finish. Stale ducks, right? The other guys in the marsh certainly had those 3.5-inch 12 gauges all fired up and weren't afraid to use them on ducks sky high. They had lots of cleanup shots too. If you've ever spent enough time in the marsh, you know what that kind of sounds like. To our south on the private land in the field, there was a blind that missed 3 ducks that probably needed gas masks even to pass above them. And the highballing at every duck by everybody in the marsh near us was also so very enjoyable. They all had obviously listened to our episode, The Art of Skybusting. They took it to heart, and they had added some serious improvements. It really does seem that we have a lot of new public hunters this year in our neighborhood, and I've also heard it from friends, and I've seen it too. Maybe no one mentored them, and we've heard this, out there that maybe there's just too many flat brims with rims running around nowadays that never had a father teach them duck hunting ethics 101, or maybe they just picked up bad habits on their own. Anyhow, here's another run at it. We're going to take a run at hunting ethics and etiquette, and give you a feel for maybe how this should all go down in the end. Hey, first, take the time to sound like a duck and read ducks as they fly. Not every duck that flies by matters and needs a hail call. Take some time to listen to hen mallards and mimic that sound. Hail calls work, but not for every duck. Feel free to jam that call where you like, but do jam it away. Now, I'm guilty of giving most ducks in reasonable range a quick 7 to 9 note decrescendo to see if their wingtips change direction. go ahead and look up on Google hen mallard calls, James Callicut, decrescendo, whatever you like. There is a paper on what a decrescendo is specifically and kind of what it sounds like in comparison to other things that ducks do, like chuckles and quacks and things like that. So do look that up, because James Callicut has a great paper on the hen mallard call and how duck calls sound or don't sound like that. We've had him on the show before, and we've also been on his. It's a MSU game bird. I'm going to get this wrong. MSU game bird channel or whatever. So you can look those folks up at Mississippi State as well. Giving them a little shout out here. But what I want to say is, like, that 7 to 9 note decrescendo is pretty typical, but a full-blown hail call at every duck that goes by in a public marsh with people all around you ruins the experience, probably for your friends next to you too. Anyhow, I'll walk 1.5 miles and shoot 50% less ducks to get away from that and the sky busting, right? Maybe some of you just suck at judging distance. But if you are rarely shooting ducks with feet down, or when you can see their eyes, and you regularly are having to clean up birds in the water or crippling ducks that you don't recover, hey, that's not normal. I just want to let folks know that, right? You should probably work harder at taking closer ethical shots. Remember, these are still animals that actually feel pain and suffer. Never forget that. So if you do down a duck that's alive, spend reasonable time looking for it and get a dog to help you find those down birds in that thick marsh as well. And, just don't shoot every direction and then figure out how to find a duck if you don't have a dog. If you're going to drop a duck in super thick vegetation and don't have a dog, then maybe don't take that shot. And my goodness, if you are taking 2 boxes of shells in to kill 6 ducks, go to the range next summer. I see very few younger folks. I'm not that old, but I see very few younger folks at the shooting club during the summer. But I see a lot of young guys sky busting, crippling, and never recovering birds. So maybe let's work on that summer practice. I don't know, think about it. I've watched a fair bit of football this year, and damn it, you look like the New York Jets this year. Like you never set foot on the practice field before a season. So get out there and practice with your gun. Next, just simply more etiquette than anything in the blind with friends and family. Always compliment people when they make great shots. Don't claim birds when group shooting. Just always try to give it to the next guy or gal, right? Like when you group shoot, be like, nice shot. Even if you think you hit the bird, it doesn't really matter. And damn it, if you shoot a banded duck, do not claim it right away, right? At least go through the process of trying to give it to one another or somebody else that shot. Always compliment someone's dog, even if they're not perfect, and understand how proud of that dog they are, because a trained retriever isn't easy, and that dog is like family to them. Hey, but fuck it. If you want to be the coolest flat-brimmed dude in the marsh rolling in with rims, go for it. And wear a no duck is too high sweatshirt. Bring out those 3.5-inch BBs and shoot them at green wings that landed on the water and mallards at 55 yards. After all, you're going to succeed at water swatting and gimping a mallard into submission after 7 shots as you run them down across the marsh. And remember, you're a hero after you high-five your friends after all. Anyhow, if you just got offended, yeah, the old guard has judged you. Seriously, though, let's take a step back. Subtle calling, like a hen mallard, and maybe even mixing in that rasp, quick hen greenwing call. Let them work. If they swing over, look at the water. You look at the water, right? You don't look up at them. Watch that retriever's eyes. Keep your head down. Watch him in the reflection of the water. From experience, know when to look back up and hit him with a hard decrescendo. They cup again. They loop back but disappear. Another group 200 yards away works them. You can hear them calling. So you stop calling, because right now, they are not your birds. But they flare, and they head your way again. The other group also didn't shoot them at 55 yards. Remember that. Here they come. The drake on the right. That drake on the right of the 3 locks up, and the pair follows. 9 o'clock, says your buddy. You've been hunting together for years, and you know each other's calls. He calls. He runs that hen decrescendo call, and you cut him off like an angry hen next to her. Then he chuckles a bit, and you run a couple quacks over the top of his call. Just perfect timing. Like you've been hanging out like two surly hen mallards for years. They're at 70, now they're 60, now they're 40, now they're 30. Feet come out, and 3 mallards, a lone drake, and a pair hang over the decoys. 3 shots, and 2 drakes down. The hen busts out to find another mate tomorrow. The yellow lab, an old boy, 9.5 years old, does his work. The owner gets him back up on the stand. The friend compliments how well he still works, even at his old age. A band shines on the second bird, and the friend on the right in this case knows it was his because he shot his lane. No crossing patterns. No blasting each other's ears or the dogs. The dog stationed in the middle on the stand. The dog wasn't quite steady, but good enough and safe for the friends. The rest of the day repeats itself over and over, but from different angles and different shots. The calling is complimentary, the shot's effective, the duck's bagged. Hey, a cripple happens, and the dog and owner spend 15 minutes, but it's obvious that this duck hit head up and is swimming through thick cattail. They come back, and the friend notes that the dog is getting tired. The owner says, yeah. He worked it, but didn't want to bury that old boy as he pulled himself tired and cold back onto the dog stand halfway through the morning. Ducks still flying, they decide to leave the marsh with 9 ducks. The old yellow has had enough. They had a great hunt, and the ducks will be here tomorrow. The ducks will be here tomorrow. Always remember that. All right, maybe enough judgment for today. In the end, we are thankful for all our great friends across duck country, flat brims and rims or not, and we all approach it differently. But we must always respect each other, our wet dogs, and very much so, the ducks. Next here, give our sponsors a listen this week if you haven't before. The Farmland Group and Wildlife Strategies are doing great work in the Mid-South and beyond. So please do take the time to have a listen and see if their products are for you. Even if not, support them by having a listen. They are truly great resources for the hunter conservationist. Next up, moon phases and duck movement, so please stick with us. Look, folks, the Farmland Group across the Mid-South is your one-stop shop for real estate brokerage, consulting, management, lending, and appraisals. If you own land or you want land, the Farmland Group is where it's at. With over $500 million in farm sales and growing, Gwynn and Shelby Smith have you covered. Look, if you're thinking about buying or selling, contact the Farmland Group to access their full suite of services. If you already own property and want to build equity and value, the Farmland Group gets it done. If you're looking to purchase a new property, well, they get that done too, and they have access to some of the best lending available. Looking to sell? Get it appraised with a Farmland Group affiliated appraiser. But let's be clear for our listenership too. They also offer farm and hunt property management to create places that attract more ducks and more bucks. Who doesn't want that? More ducks and more bucks. Let the Farmland Group build value into your property. Find them today at farmlg.com. That's farmlg.com. You're not going to be disappointed. Contact Shelby Smith today at farmlg.com and let him know that the Foul Weather Podcast sent you their way. On to a brief talk about moon phases and duck migration and movement, because honestly, in no way has this topic ever been done justice. The most common place we hear about moon phases and animal movement is deer hunting. But if you've ever looked at the research, it doesn't actually quantify the amount of illumination from the moon, or very often, even if the moon is actually up during the time of movement. Understand that the moon doesn't just automatically come up when the sun goes down. The timing of the moonrise actually changes by about 45 minutes each day, and it might not even come up until like 1 a.m., and then it could be super cloudy, which would make moon phase pretty much a moot point for deer movement under a moonlit sky. The same for duck migration. The timing of when the moon is up and how the cloud cover influences ambient light is a real problem for quantifying how the moon phase influences duck migration. Also understand that ducks use the Earth's magnetic field, the stars, landmarks, and the sun to migrate. That is, birds have a geomagnetic sense of what direction is north and south. I'm not going to get into all of that exactly right now, but they do have a geomagnetic sense in their brain of what direction is north and south. They also use the stars within 35 degrees of the North Star. So even if some constellations are covered during like a partial cloudy sky, they can use the other stars to orient themselves in the right direction when flying at night. And a lot of ducks do migrate at night. A lot of birds migrate at night. It reduces potentially predation, but also most of them can't feed at night, right? So they feed during the day, and then they make those migratory movements at night and show up in the morning, mid-morning, or maybe sometimes often into noon. They also use the rising sun in the east and the setting sun in the west as a measure of the approximate area of where north and south lie. For moon phases, landmarks is probably the most important way they migrate, because for birds, just like when you're in a plane on a moonlit night, they can see the shapes of those large water bodies reflecting back at them as the moon shines on them and orient based on experience and simply following water courses south. So not only does moon phase matter, but the overall illumination is very important so that water reflection is possible. A full moon with cloud cover does not result in water landmarks a duck can actually see. So for diving ducks that use large water bodies during migration, it is quite possible that moon phase matters more than that for dabbling ducks for orienting towards destinations. Dr. Dave Ankney, in a cigarette smoke-filled cabin over a bottle of Labatt Blue, once taught me that the bluebills showed up on Lake Erie on the first full moon of October, as long as that full moon was not in the first week of October. That day stuck with me, and more recently, we investigated diving duck migration and included photoperiod along with weather and found that photoperiod played an important role in timing of migration. In fact, photoperiod, or the time of year, made more of a difference in diving duck migration than we've seen in dabbling ducks. So that idea that a full moon in October, well, it kind of stuck with me. But it couldn't be too early, right? Because that didn't beckon that first kind of timing of migration that's ingrained in bluebills onto Lake Erie. So decades after Dave's passing, we most recently found this in our analysis, that bluebills seem kind of fixed on that full moon near the right time of year. Pretty cool stuff. We have to get Dr. Doug Osborne on the line, and I emailed him about this last night while in the deer stand. But they tracked mallards with GPS telemetry in Arkansas, and this stuff just came out, right? And they tested a lot of weather factors as well as moon illumination on movements and detected that nightly mallard movement increased by about 2 times, a little more than 2 times, during full compared to a new moon. That is, mallards are moving during the night more often or twice as much during a full moon compared to a new moon. What I asked Doug in that email was how they quantified illumination and how it was measured. Because I couldn't find it in there. It does at least look like they dealt with the amount of time the moon was up, but how illumination was quantified is not in that paper. So I'm not sure if cloud cover was accounted for. No matter, I think they did a very good job with it. In moon phase increased nightly movements, so mallards are certainly responding and likely feeding on those full moons. Most recently in North Dakota, my experience suggests that full moon without cloud cover may negatively affect hunting success. We had a pothole with about 300 birds on it, and I sat next to that pothole to hold it for, an hour or so before sunrise. Later, my wife Sarah and my buddy Heath showed up, right on time, letting me sit there and listen to and hear ducks feeding and coming and going. That full moon, I guess, might as well been like high noon to those ducks. So that was also during a warm spell, right? So what we saw were ducks kind of sitting on that pothole at night, under that full moon, and they were actually flying back and forth, maybe from spots they were roosting to come grab a bite to eat. There were kind of pond weeds dug up and tubers kind of laying all over. And we had a decent shoot. We noted that in that podcast afterwards, that episode. But we didn't shoot maybe as many as I would have expected, given that there were 300 birds in there, right? We might have expected 3 full bags, but we did not come out with 3 full limits. So, but it was also warm, right? So they were feeding during the night, and then they were going to sit somewhere safe during the day. A lot of these were probably stale ducks also that had been shot at. These weren't fresh ducks hot from the north. Conversely, though, a full moon, weather severity great enough to cause migration of ducks, and a northwest wind can very often create an amazing day with fresh ducks hot from the north. Very often, a bit kind of after, and maybe into midday, right? Like, they don't always just fly all night and then land first thing in the morning. Sometimes these birds are coming most of the night, and when the sun rises, they're not quite at their destination, and you'll have this fallout of brand new birds hot from the north, 9 o'clock, sometimes until midday. Most of the afternoons, unless there's a very specific weather system, are not as good for specific flights. Midday flights are not as much of a thing as overnight and into the morning. But man, those are the days we live for, but on most years, those flight days where you're calling in ducks and their feet haven't even touched that water. I mean, we have ducks that come out of Canada into New York, and we shoot them before they've even hit U.S. soil or U.S. water, right? But that only happens about 4 or 5 days out of the year in most cases. So, as always, that's what the FowlWeather Podcast does. It picks those best days for you. So keep listening to us throughout the year, of course. Next up, our duck migration forecast for the coming week. So please stick with us, my friends. Hold on, folks. Don't turn that channel. We've got some really exciting news for you. The FowlWeather Podcast has teamed up with Wildlife Strategies. That's right. I'm now working directly with Ryan Delaney of Wildlife Strategies to build value into your land. Wildlife Strategies is already known for quality wildlife habitat management, be it deer, turkeys, ducks, or whatever you pursue. Ryan knows his stuff. Look, I don't add my name to just any business, but I believe in what Wildlife Strategies is doing for landowners throughout the Southeast U.S. and beyond. If you want science-based solutions to create great wildlife habitat, Wildlife Strategies is your best bet. If you're interested in ducks, when we say, may your skies be filled, well, Wildlife Strategies does just that. They fill your skies with ducks. Contact Ryan Delaney today at ryan@farmlg.com for a site visit. You won't be disappointed you did. Ryan covers the southern tier of states, and I'm available to build habitat management plans across the northern tier. Contact us today for a quote. The Wildlife Strategies team sees your property through from the initial assessment and development of a 3-year time frame management plan through annual check-ins and course corrections as needed. Contact Ryan today at ryan@farmlg.com or Dr. Mike at FowlWeather.co. You won't be disappointed you did. Fill your skies with ducks and your forests and fields with deer and turkey with Wildlife Strategies. And we are back on to this week's migration forecast. The west wins again. So let's start with the Pacific and western portion of the Central Flyway. Much of Wyoming has been covered with at least a dusting of snow last week, and this week that will work its way down into Colorado early in the week. Alaska and western Canada also have temperatures looking to move ducks down the Pacific Flyway during the coming week. Most of this movement will be early dabbling ducks into California and into as far south as the panhandle of Oklahoma and western Texas. Mallards are even predicted to decline in abundance in Wyoming this week, so a movement of new mallards into Colorado and possibly locales farther east is expected Monday through Wednesday, with most favorable winds Monday and Wednesday night for arrival of migrants on Tuesday and Thursday. I'd also expect Nebraska and Kansas to pick up some of this movement as well, especially in the western portions of these states. Moving into the prairies, I really think that people who waited for their trips out there to this region are going to be rewarded in the coming week. As temperatures start to decrease substantially and the snow line slowly marches south through Canada, we expect a continued movement of ducks into the open prairie, and mallard numbers should continue near peak at about the latitude of the Canada-U.S. prairie border for the coming week. No loss of mallards is expected, though, in the coming week in that region, as WSI values do not reach anything near pushing them farther south. Look, we just posted an image of the WSI, or Weather Severity Index values, from last year compared to this year for Devils Lake, North Dakota, on our Facebook page. So do go check that out. If you have interest kind of in other comparisons, let us know and we can develop them and post them on social media for y'all. We got asked by some folks, how will this affect, let's say, Missouri or Louisiana duck hunting this season? And I'd say it's just too early to say, right? It's been warm in the prairies, very warm so far this year. And next week, we're going to release our long-term seasonal forecasts part 2, which is our most accurate forecast of the season yet, because of kind of a lot of those, atmospheric patterns are kind of set in motion by now that help us really predict that winter weather going forward. But I'll tell you, right, Devils Lake, North Dakota last year had that snowstorm. And it pushed birds south a bit more. There were still mallards hanging around and things like that, but there was definitely a decline in mallards as they moved into Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and places farther south. But this year, it's just been hot, really, on the prairies. So, okay, on to thinking about farther south in the Mississippi Flyway. It's probably going to be a bit of a struggle again this week with a trickle of ducks, but best bet is to focus a bit later in the week as that cold takes, from the west, takes time to push itself out of the northwest into the prairies. So I'd expect movement of early migrating dabbling ducks like widgeon, gadwall, greenwings, and shovelers into mid-latitudes, maybe a trickle of pintails into like Illinois and Missouri, but nothing substantial. And for mallards, that migration is pretty stalled into the northern tier states right now of the kind of eastern central flyway and the Mississippi Flyway. All right, over on the Atlantic Flyway, it's pretty much status quo with moderate temps, nothing worthy of a major migration. Or, ducks are going to trickle a bit out of the north, just early ducks. Best bet is, if you're going to take some time off, is early in the week to see some new ducks when there's some cooler weather. It's going to warm up later on. And there may be some smaller movements of new pintails into New York, but not any farther south. Late in the week and maybe into early next week, a movement of widgeon and green-winged teal are forecast into areas just slightly south of New York, right? So not a lot going on. So where it's hot is the west, western North America and the Pacific Flyway and western Central Flyway. And where it's basically not anything is from, central Ohio east. Everything there has been pretty lukewarm, all right? But the rain forecast for this week kind of steals the show as well, with early and late week events across the southern prairies into the southeast U.S., areas that really need some rain right now. I don't know if it's going to be enough for y'all to catch in your wetlands, but if you got time to put boards in, watch the rain forecast this week. We also have a thing in the Gulf, and it might turn across the Yucatan going northwest into the Gulf about midweek. So watch our Instagram posts and Facebook to keep track of that tropical system. It has an 80% chance right now of developing into something that's going to bring tropical depression to hurricane-type activity into the Gulf, all right? Again, not trying to hope for hurricanes that hurt people, trying to hope for weather that helps ducks. So let's think about that and keep our heads screwed on straight. No hate mail at Dr. Mike at FowlWeather.co about hoping for hurricanes. That's not it. I'm just keeping you appraised of what the weather's doing, my friends. Last, new diving ducks, hot from the north, trickle in this week? No. After a good movement last week into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, they sputter this week. and no substantial new migrants are expected during the coming weeks. So keep your finger on keeping the pressure off those diving ducks. Y'all are going to be moderate to maybe slightly warm in some of that area, and pick your days to hunt them. Don't pressure them too much, because I don't think there's a lot of new diving ducks showing up. Probably a trickle. Okay, next week we release part 2 of our long-term seasonal forecast, so remember to tune in. That's the one that sets us up for December and January for y'all in the Deep South to know what's coming this winter. Thanks for listening, and as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.